voice for the first time in ages. But it was immediately evident that there was a very good energy, and I could tell that a lot of these people had been there for quite a while, and that was something I gravitated towards because, as I said, we had very few resident volunteers in my camp, and I had a huge turnover rate, and I ran, so many people through mine. So it was nice to see one where a lot of people were staying and committed to staying and working there. And so I dropped her off, and I went back and later contacted Richard Scott, and because they had spoken of a Christmas party, so I wanted to bring my volunteers to a fun Christmas party, and so I brought everyone who was in my camp at the time to their tree burning, and I got to know a few of the other people, and it was extremely fun, and I realized we hadn't been having a lot of fun over in at Disaster Corps. We didn't really. It's interesting. It certainly wasn't miserable at all. We enjoyed ourselves, but because of the short-lived periods of time that people would stay, we didn't organize things or put things together in the same way. We'd have dinners together and stuff, but then people would flit out and they would be gone. So it was fun to see that everyone had gotten together and built this big structure and had the Santa Claus little scenario set up. We loved it. And I heard some chatter about the fact that they were considering moving from Biloxi to Plaquemines Parish or somewhere else to start. Felt like their work was not necessarily completed, but they had reached an impasse in Biloxi and it was time to move on. And I immediately thought of Pearlington, and so I said, boy, I'm going to really start a campaign to get these guys over there. So I started calling and begging and cajoling and said, please just come, just for one afternoon, just come and look at this little town and think about it, consider it as a possibility. And I brought Mr. Scott over there, and it was interesting that we ended up meeting Tony that first day, walking down the street looking quite lost, and told us his story and his house as is revealed through this film. Wherever Tony's house became a great project. So I think I brought Richard out there once more, and I think he said he really wanted to think on it and get a feeling from it. And I think that after that second time, he really felt a connection and decided that it would be a really viable place for them to move, and that they could do a lot of work there, especially because it's such a small community. It was the kind of place where you could really make connections with people who live there, friendships, and also visually see the kind of impact that you would have. And that was, I knew they had the equipment, and I thought, wow, they could start demoing houses here and people could actually start building again, and we could see it happen. That's what excited me the most, and so they moved to Pearlington.
There were groups up and down the Gulf Coast. What made them different?
Well, obviously, machines. That was, I knew in my heart that Pearlington, it was going to take a lot longer to get the Army Corps of Engineers and stuff into that town to start wrecking houses and moving debris. The debris piles are another thing that, we all speak of. Yes, the rotten, stenching refrigerators and the giant piles of debris out front of people's houses. And to be an individual who lives with that in front of you every day, you become, I think as volunteers, we became desensitized to it. But I think a lot of the residents, I couldn't imagine knowing that was my home and waking up every day and saying, look at this pile of shit in front of me that used to be my house, look at this. This is just so sad. It's just a daily reminder with little bits and pieces of your life sticking out of it. And I'm sure there's lots of pictures and footage of how gigantic these piles were. I mean, they were shocking, huge, 20 feet tall, 30 feet tall in some cases, giant piles of trash. And so they were everywhere in Burlington. And also the boats and I remember that they actually reclaimed some crypts and put them back in an old cemetery and things like that. I mean, the smallest things make such a difference. And I knew those machines would have a very visual, very lasting impact on that community. And it did. It looked so much better by the time they left. It was remarkable. And it's true, Burlington really was far down on the queue. The Army Corps did start coming in there, did start removing debris piles, but it was long after they had been doing it in Waveland and Bay St. Louis.
Well, don't assume that we know. Tell us about the machinery, or what these folks brought to the table that you didn't feel like recruiting from somewhere else.
Well, obviously, they had a backhoe and a front end loader. Is that right? Somebody else tells this story though, right? That Doosan.
Don't assume.
Okay. Apparently, these two big, beautiful orange pieces of machinery, a front end loader, a backhoe that Doosan Daewoo donated, new ones, to this group to use, because there was an individual in the group who was extremely capable and knowledgeable, and it was quite amazing to watch him pick up tiny things out of giant piles and set them aside, because someone said, please save my clawfoot bathtub, and he could pick it up and set it over there. And definitely a whiz with the stuff. He knew exactly what he was doing and more. It was quite a symphony, really, to watch. It's funny, I never had any idea that machines were kind of graceful and could move in that manner. It was quite awesome to watch. So these machines were the only two privately held pieces of machinery like this on the coast. There wasn't anything else, right? Correct, if I'm not mistaken, which I might be. I don't think any other individuals. I think it was basically the Army Corps of Engineers that had orchestrated and organized all of the machines.
If you could say that again, about that no one else had that kind of stuff.
It's true, though, isn't it?
It is true.
Okay.
But you stopped and asked me a question in the middle of it. So.
Yeah. Okay. I dread the idea of you using anything that I'm factually incorrect and having to live with that. Yes.
You have to understand.
Yeah.
We're doing 40 of these interviews. We're
Yes.
asking the same questions of everybody.
And everybody's going to say the same thing.
Well, then we'll take the best one, right? So,
Gotcha.
if you're not certain, we're not going to use it.
Right.
So don't worry about that.
Okay.
It's better for us to get.
But I'm so authoritative and I sound so certain. Yes.
Somebody who sounds like they know what they're doing.
What was it about why were these machines significant?
The machines were significant because there was, on the entire Gulf Coast, there were no machines that any private individual or private company or nonprofit organization or anything had that they were using to move debris piles, pick up boats, demo houses, anything else. These are the only two pieces of machinery that were working on the Gulf Coast in the hands of private individuals. Everything else was owned and operated by contractors leased by the Army Corps of Engineers. So they were doing what they were told in the order that they were told to do it. And the Army Corps worked closely with FEMA. And as I said, I think the size of a town like Burlington really kind of fell back on the queue. So that was a huge motivating factor to me to get those two pieces of machinery into a town that small. I knew that visually things would change quickly, and I knew emotionally things would change quickly for people in that town. I knew their morale would be boosted by it.